I had 200K for my future. My mom gave it all to my brother, so I sued her. I grew up in a modest suburban home in Ohio, the older daughter who always had to be responsible, working part-time jobs from age 16 while my younger brother partied without a care. Our dad passed away 5 years ago, leaving a will that split his 400K savings equally between me and my brother. But mom was the executor and held my share in trust for my future home or education, yet she always favored my brother openly, saying things like, "Boys need more support to succeed," and denying me equal opportunities like funding my college while paying for his. I remember those family dinners where she'd heap praise on him for the smallest things, like passing a class, while she'd brush off my straight A's as expected from a girl who should focus on finding a good husband. It stung every time, but I pushed through, building my own life with a steady job in marketing, saving every penny on top of that trust fund I knew was waiting for me. I'd check in with mom now and then about it, and she'd always say it was safe. Growing with interest meant for when I really needed it. My brother, Alex, was 3 years younger, always the golden child in her eyes. Even when his business ideas flopped one after another, like that failed food truck venture that drained his own savings. I loved him, but the favoritism built this quiet resentment in me over the years, though I never confronted it head-on because family was supposed to stick together. That all changed one crisp autumn afternoon in 2024. When I finally got that job promotion I'd been chasing for months, I was sitting at my desk in the small office downtown, surrounded by stacks of client files and the hum of coworkers typing away, feeling a rush of excitement as my boss handed me the official letter with the raise. It meant I could start house hunting seriously, maybe put down roots in a quiet neighborhood outside the city. I pulled out my phone right there, opened my banking app to check the trust fund balance. It was something I did every few months for peace of mind. The screen loaded slowly, and when it did, my heart dropped. The account showed zero, completely empty, transferred out months ago without any notification to me. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking a little as I scrolled through the transaction history. There it was, a lump sum withdrawal 6 months back, straight to another account I didn't recognize. No explanation, no alerts. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, and the office noise faded into a distant buzz. How could this happen? I double-checked the login, refreshed the page 3 times, but it stayed the same. Empty. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my coat, told my boss I had a family emergency, and drove straight to Mom's house, the same 2-story brick place where we'd grown up, with the faded blue shutters and the overgrown rose bushes Dad used to tend. The drive took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours, my mind racing through possibilities, maybe a bank error or identity theft. I pulled into the driveway, parked crookedly, and marched up the porch steps, knocking harder than I meant to. Mom opened the door, her face lighting up at first, then frowning when she saw my expression. She was in her usual cardigan and slacks, hair pulled back, looking every bit the retired schoolteacher she was. "Sarah, what's wrong? You look upset." I pushed past her into the living room, the familiar smell of her lavender candles hitting me, but it didn't calm me like it used to. I held up my phone, showing her the empty account screen. "Mom, what happened to my trust fund? The 200K from Dad, it's gone. All of it." She paused, setting down the mug of tea she'd been holding, and sat on the edge of the worn floral couch, gesturing for me to join her. I stayed standing, arms crossed. That's when she admitted it, her voice casual, like she was discussing the weather. "Oh, that. I gave it to Alex. His business was failing, and he needed the money more. You know how it is. He's the one who'll carry on the family name, build something lasting. You're doing fine on your own, Sarah. You'll marry well someday and be taken care of." Her words hit like a slap. I felt my face flush, a mix of anger and hurt boiling up. She'd always hinted at this outdated crap, but to hear it so bluntly, justifying stealing my inheritance because I was a girl, it was humiliating. Standing there in the room, full of family photos where I was always in the background, literally and figuratively, I pressed her, my voice rising. "You gave my money to him, without asking? Dad's will said equal split. How could you do that?" She shrugged, sipping her tea. "I'm the executor. I decided what was best for the family. Alex promised it'd turn things around." I paced the room, trying to process it, my shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. That's when I remembered the old laptop she kept in the den for emails. I asked if I could check something, and she waved me off, saying, "Sure, go ahead." I sat at the desk, Logged into her email with the password she'd shared years ago for family stuff. It hadn't changed. Scrolling through, I found it. An email chain from months back between her and Alex, discussing the transfer. She detailed how she'd forged my signature on the withdrawal forms, even joking about how Sarah's too independent to notice right away. There was an attachment with the scanned documents, my name scrawled in her handwriting. My stomach twisted. A forgery? This wasn't just favoritism, it was illegal. I printed it out right there, the printer whirring loudly in the quiet house, and confronted her again, holding the papers. "You forged my signature? Mom, this is fraud." She stood up then, her face hardening, no remorse in her eyes. "You're overreacting, Sarah. It's family money, and I did what was right. Boys need that push. Girls like you find their way. Stop being so dramatic." Her dismissal cut deep, tears stinging my eyes as I grabbed the printouts and stormed out, slamming the door behind me. The betrayal burned, years of being second best crashing down. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, breathing heavy. I couldn't let this go. Wiping my face, I pulled out my phone and texted my old college friend, Lisa, who's a lawyer now. "Need advice. Family trust issue. Call me?" My phone rang minutes later, and as I drove away from that house, I explained everything, my voice shaky but determined. She listened, then said it sounded like a clear breach of fiduciary duty, especially with the forgery evidence. "We can sue," she said. "Get your dad's will copy from his old lawyer first." I nodded to myself, turning onto the highway. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days after that confrontation blurred into a haze of anger and determination as I dove headfirst into gathering whatever I could to fight back against Mom's betrayal. I started at the bank the very next morning, driving to the local branch where the trust was held. The same one Dad had set up years ago in downtown Columbus. The building was cold and sterile, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and tellers behind thick glass windows. I requested all the transaction records for the account, showing my ID and explaining it was my trust fund. The manager, a middle-aged woman with a sympathetic nod, printed out the statements after verifying my details, and there it was, in black and white. The $200K withdrawn in one go, transferred to an account in Alex's name, with Mom's signature as executor and what looked like my forged one attached. I thanked her quietly, folding the papers into my bag, my mind already racing to the next step. From there, I called Dad's old lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, who'd handled the will back in 2019. His office was in a strip mall on the edge of town, cluttered with file boxes and smelling like old coffee. He remembered me right away. Pulling the original will from his records, it clearly stated an equal split, no discretion for Mom to redistribute based on her whims. He made me a certified copy on the spot, shaking his head when I told him what happened. "That's a breach if I've ever seen one," he said, his voice gruff but kind. I didn't stop there, reaching out to a couple of family friends who'd been close to Dad, like Aunt Clara, not really an aunt, but Mom's old neighbor who'd witnessed the will reading, and Uncle Mike, Dad's fishing buddy from work. I met Aunt Clara at her cozy kitchen table over tea, the room filled with the scent of fresh-baked cookies, and she confirmed what I'd suspected. Mom had always grumbled about the equal split, saying things like, "Sarah doesn't need it as much. She's a girl who'll land on her feet with a husband." Aunt Clara signed a statement right there, her handwriting shaky but firm, detailing Mom's biases she'd overheard at family gatherings. Uncle Mike did the same over the phone, emailing me a notarized version after I explained the situation. He'd been at the funeral and heard Dad insist on fairness for both kids. With these pieces in hand, the bank records, the will copy, and the witness statements, I felt a spark of power returning, like I wasn't just the overlooked daughter anymore. Lisa, my lawyer friend, reviewed everything over coffee at a local diner that afternoon, her laptop open amid the clatter of plates and chatter. She nodded approvingly, outlining how this showed Mom's long-standing favoritism and the illegal forgery, building a solid case for breach of fiduciary duty and fraud. We filed the lawsuit papers that week, demanding the full $200K back, plus interest and damages for the emotional hell this put me through. Serving Mom with the notice was the counterattack I'd been building toward. I hired a process server to deliver it to her door, imagining her face as she signed for it, the legal weight finally shifting in my favor. But then came the small twist that knocked the wind out of me. My phone rang late one evening as I was sorting through more emails at home, my apartment lit by the soft glow of my desk lamp, takeout containers scattered around. It was Alex, his voice hesitant on the line. calling from his place across town. I hadn't spoken to him since the discovery, but he jumped right in, admitting he knew about the forgery when Mom transferred the money. "Sarah, I didn't ask for it, but Mom insisted. It was for the business, you know? And honestly, it's just how things are. You don't need as much. You'll get married, have a family to support you." His words echoed Mom's sexism so perfectly it made my blood boil, like he'd been brainwashed by her outdated views all these years. I gripped the phone tighter, pacing my small living room with its mismatched furniture and stacks of work files, feeling the rift between us widen. He begged me not to sue, saying it would ruin everything, but I cut him off, telling him this was about fairness, not his failing ventures. Hanging up, I realized this call was more evidence. His admission could back up the favoritism angle if needed. The family rift hit its peak at a tense dinner Mom insisted on hosting a few days later, claiming it was to clear the air before things got uglier. I showed up at the old house reluctantly, the driveway lined with relatives' cars, Aunt Linda, Cousin Beth, and others who'd been looped in by Mom's gossip. The dining room table was set with her best china, the air thick with the smell of roast chicken and tension. As soon as we sat down, Mom launched into her vicious lies, portraying me as the jealous troublemaker who'd always hated Alex, exaggerating old stories like the time I argued with him over chores as a teen to make me sound petty and selfish. "Sarah's just greedy," she said to the group, her voice dripping with false concern, while passing the potatoes. "She's doing fine at her job, but she wants to drag her brother down because she can't stand him succeeding." The relatives shifted uncomfortably, some nodding along, and I felt the humiliation burn again, my fork frozen midway to my mouth. I defended myself calmly at first, laying out the facts about Dad's will and the forgery, but Mom interrupted with more barbs, calling me ungrateful for all she'd done, like denying me college funds while paying for Alex's because boys build the future. It escalated into a shouting match, with her dismissing my pain as overblown, and I left early, the door slamming behind me, vowing not to let her poison the well. Back home that night, I channeled the anger into more leverage, calling Mom the next day under the pretense of reconciliation, but recording the conversation with an app Lisa recommended. It was legal in Ohio as long as one party knew. She took the bait, admitting over the line to the transfer and her sexist reasons, repeating lines like, "Girls like you don't need the same start. Alex has to provide for a family." One day, I saved the file immediately, emailing it to Lisa, who said it was gold for the case, showing intent and bias. The escalation came swift after that. The court granted a preliminary freeze on Alex's business, assets linked to the money. A judge's order served to him that same week. His food truck operation, already struggling, ground to a halt without access to those funds, and word spread through the family grapevine, exposing Mom's manipulation for what it was. Relatives started texting me privately, questioning her story, and I felt the tide turning, the injustice I'd suffered finally cracking her facade. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about holding her accountable for years of treating me like I was worth less. The legal battle ramped up in the weeks following the asset freeze, pulling us all into a whirlwind of court dates and heated arguments that exposed every ugly layer of Mom's favoritism. It started with the preliminary hearings at the Franklin County Courthouse in Columbus, a grand old building with marble floors and echoing hallways that made every footstep feel heavy, with consequence. I arrived early for the first one in late October 2024, dressed in my best business suit, my hands clutching a folder of evidence as I navigated the security checkpoint. The metal detector beeping softly behind me, Lisa met me in the lobby, her briefcase in hand. Going over our strategy one last time, we'd present the will, the bank records, and the recorded call to dismantle Mom's defense from the start. Mom showed up with her lawyer, a slick guy in a pinstripe suit named Mr. Reynolds, and Alex trailing behind her like a shadow, his face pale and avoiding my gaze. We filed into the courtroom, the wooden benches creaking under us, the air conditioned and sterile, with the judge, a stern woman in her 50s named Judge Harlan, presiding from the bench, her gavel resting nearby. Mom's side argued right away that the money was just a family gift to help Alex's business, claiming no harm done since it was all in the spirit of supporting the household. But Lisa countered sharply, laying out the equal split in Dad's will and pointing to the forgery as clear fraud. I sat there, my heart pounding, watching the judge nod thoughtfully as our evidence stacked up, the projector screen flickering with scans of the emails and bank transfers. The intensity built as we moved into witness testimonies over the next sessions, spread out over November, each one chipping away at Mom's story and ramping up the emotional stakes. I took the stand first in the second hearing. The courtroom hushed, except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, swearing in with my hand on the Bible as the bailiff watched. Under Lisa's questioning, I detailed the backstory, the years of Mom's sexist comments, like how she'd fund Alex's whims while telling me to find a husband for security, and the shock of discovering the empty account after my promotion. Mom's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively, trying to paint me as bitter and overreacting, asking loaded questions like, "Isn't it true you resented your brother long before this?" I kept my cool, answering firmly that this was about justice, not old grudges, but inside. The humiliation flared again, feeling exposed in front of strangers judging our family mess. Then came the reversal shift that turned the tide. Our surprise witness, Dad's old accountant, Mr. Peterson, a retired guy with wire-rimmed glasses and a stack of old ledgers. He shuffled to the stand in the third hearing, his voice steady as he testified about overhearing Mom complain for years about wasting money on a daughter who won't carry the family name, even back when Dad was alive, detailing specific conversations at holiday dinners where she'd push for unequal treatment. The courtroom murmured, and I saw Mom's face drain of color, her hands twisting in her lap as Mr. Reynolds objected, but the judge overruled, allowing it as relevant to her bias and intent. That testimony opened the floodgates, and the small twist hit when Alex, of all people, partially turned on Mom during his own time on the stand later that week. The courtroom was packed with a few relatives now, the wooden doors swinging as people came and went, the scent of coffee from the hallway drifting in. Alex looked uncomfortable in his ill-fitting suit, fidgeting as Lisa questioned him about the emails showing Mom's pressure, threats of cutting him off entirely if he didn't accept the money and keep quiet. He admitted it reluctantly, his voice low, saying she'd manipulated him with guilt trips about being the man of the family, but then he backtracked in public, defending her to the judge by echoing her lines about traditional values, trying to save face and not fully betray her. It was a half measure, his eyes darting to Mom for approval, but it still cracked her united front, the judge noting the inconsistency in her notes. I felt a surge of vindication sitting there, the pieces falling into place, but also a pang of sadness seeing my brother so torn, caught in her web all these years. The emotional outrage peaked in the final hearing of this phase, right before Thanksgiving. When Mom herself took the stand, the tension thick enough to cut as she adjusted the microphone, her voice trembling at first, but then hardening. Under cross-examination, she broke down initially, tears streaming as she admitted the transfer and forgery, but then she doubled down on the injustice, claiming, "Traditional values mean sons come first. It's how I was raised, and it's for the family's future." The judge leaned forward, her expression stern, condemning it outright as discriminatory and irrelevant to the law, stating clearly that trusts aren't for personal biases. The room fell silent, relatives whispering in the back rows, and I felt the outrage boil over in me, years of being undervalued laid bare for all to see. Mom shot me a glare from the stand, her eyes filled with resentment, but it only fueled my resolve. After that, I rejected a low settlement offer they floated during a recess in the judge's chambers, a dimly lit room with leather chairs and legal books lining the walls, where Mr. Reynolds tried to spin it as family peace, with Mom adding a backhanded apology about meaning. Well, I turned it down flat, telling Lisa we push for full restitution, to hold her accountable for every slight. Every time she made me feel like less because I was the daughter. As the hearings wrapped, the tension built further with family members starting to side with me privately, texts and calls coming in after each session, Aunt Linda admitting Mom's stories didn't add up, Cousin Beth offering support over coffee at a nearby cafe, her words quiet but firm. It isolated Mom more, her calls to me going unanswered as I focused on the case, the weight of her cruelty finally turning against her. The judge scheduled the final ruling for early December, but already the reversal felt complete. My evidence overwhelming her defenses, the courtroom battles exposing the deep-rooted bias that had poisoned our family for so long. I left each hearing exhausted but empowered, driving home through the falling leaves, knowing this fight was reclaiming not just the money, but my worth in a family that had always put me second. The climax hit in early December 2024, right as the first snow dusted the streets of Columbus, turning the city into a quiet, frozen scene that matched the chill in our family ties. I walked into the Franklin County Courthouse for the final ruling that morning, the grand entrance hall echoing with my footsteps on the marble floor, the air carrying a mix of polished wood and stale coffee from the nearby vending machines. Lisa was already there in the lobby, her coat dusted with flurries, reviewing notes on her tablet as we headed to the courtroom together. The wooden doors swinging open to reveal the familiar benches now half filled with relatives who'd shown up for the end, Aunt Linda and Cousin Beth among them, sitting on my side for the first time. Mom and Alex arrived moments later, her face drawn and tight, him slouched beside Mr. Reynolds, who shuffled papers with a resigned look. Judge Harlan took the bench promptly, her robe settling as she called the session to order, the gavel's sharp rap cutting through the tension like a knife. She reviewed the case succinctly, her voice steady and authoritative, highlighting the overwhelming evidence, the will's equal split, the forged documents, the recorded admissions, and the testimonies exposing Mom's biased intent. This is a clear breach of fiduciary duty, rooted in unfair and discriminatory practices, she stated, her eyes scanning the room before landing on Mom. The court orders the defendants to repay the full $200,000 to the plaintiff, plus interest and penalties for fraud, totaling an additional $50,000, to be sourced from liquidating family assets if necessary, including the defendant's home equity or the brothers' business holdings. The ruling landed like a thunderclap, the courtroom falling into stunned silence as Mom's shoulders slumped, her hands clenching the table edge, while Alex buried his face in his hands, the reality of his frozen assets now permanent. I felt a rush of relief wash over me, my breath catching as Lisa squeezed my arm, whispering, "We did it." But Mom wasn't done. She stood shakily during the closing, attempting a tearful apology from her seat, her voice cracking as she addressed the judge and then me. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I thought I was doing right by the family. Following traditions that put sons first, it's how things were for me." Her words hung there, laced with the same justifications that had fueled her cruelty. No real remorse behind the tears, just more excuses for years of making me feel worthless. I met her gaze steadily from across the room, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows, and shook my head, stating firmly for the record, "Your favoritism didn't just take my money, it destroyed any trust we had. I'm cutting ties. This ends here." The judge nodded approvingly, adjourning the court with a final gavel strike, and as people filed out, relatives murmuring in hushed tones, Mom tried to approach me in the hallway, her eyes pleading, but I turned away, walking out into the snowy daylight with Lisa, the cold air hitting my face like freedom. That victory brought an unexpected small twist a few days later. As I sorted through the final paperwork at home, my apartment warm with the heater humming and holiday lights twinkling on the small tree I'd put up for myself, Lisa had forwarded me additional documents from Mr. Hargrove, Dad's old lawyer, including a sealed envelope he'd held onto per Dad's instructions. Inside was a note from Dad, written shortly before his death in 2019, expressing his regret over Mom's biases. He'd seen her favoritism brewing and set up a small hidden account just for me, another $20,000 tucked away in a separate trust that Mom never knew about, with interest bringing it to $25,000 now. His handwriting was familiar, the words simple. "Sarah, you're strong and deserve equal ground. Use this if she ever tips the scales." It was validation I'd never expected, tears blurring my vision as I read it on the couch, the weight of his quiet support, lifting years of doubt. I transferred the funds immediately, adding it to the recovered money, and felt the emotional satisfaction settle in deep, like closing a long open wound. Empowered, no longer the overlooked daughter, but someone who'd fought and won. With the full amount back in my account by the new year, after they sold off part of Alex's business equipment and tapped into Mom's savings to comply with the order, I invested wisely, putting a down payment on a cozy house in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, the kind with a yard and room to grow, something I'd dreamed of during those lean years. The move happened in spring 2025, boxes stacked in the living room as I unpacked, the fresh paint smell mixing with takeout from my favorite spot, feeling liberated from the toxicity that had defined my family. I shared my story with a few close friends over coffee meetups, the steam rising from our mugs as I encouraged them to challenge any parental sexism they faced, to document everything and seek legal help early, protecting their rights before it escalated like mine did. It wasn't about gloating, it was about turning pain into a lesson, helping others avoid the isolation and resentment that could have consumed me. Years later, in 2026, as I settled into my life, a solid career, a circle of friends who felt like chosen family, and no more shadows from the past, Alex reached out somewhat reformed, a hesitant email popping up one evening while I scrolled on my laptop, the screen glowing in the dim light of my home office. He'd hit rock bottom after the ruling, lost the business entirely, but used the time to reflect. Admitting Mom's influence had blinded him to the unfairness. He apologized sincerely, no echoes of her sexism, and suggested coffee to rebuild. But I maintained boundaries, replying politely that I wished him well but needed space, focusing on my own path without the weight of toxic dynamics. Mom never reached out again, her silence a final confirmation of the rift her actions caused, and I was okay with that. The empowerment from standing up carrying me forward, a reminder that justice, even in family, was worth the fight.